Hello, beautiful souls. Raina here. And today I wanted to make a video on Tantra. I felt like this was a really important video to make because this is the path that I follow. It's one of the lineages that I practice within the overall science of Sanatana Dharma, also known as Hinduism. And I just feel like it really is something that is so misunderstood. And it's something that if people were to understand it better and really know what it actually entails, then people will be able to really harness its true potential. For many people, especially those in the West, Tantra usually brings about, just the term alone, the name alone, it usually brings about ideas of sexuality and different sexual poses and all these things that honestly isn't really what it encompasses. And if it does, it's such a small part. And actually a lot of paths of Tantra, because there are several, they don't even talk about that at all. It's actually not even part of the pathway at all. So I wanted to clarify a little about what Tantra is, because I do feel like for so many of those on the spiritual path, especially for those that might not even specifically follow Hinduism, that they tend to throw it around a lot without even really understanding what it means and without really harnessing its true potential, because really it's such a powerful, beautiful practice that has, again, the potential to really alchemize so much pain and suffering in many people's lives. So Tantra is a spiritual practice that has deep roots in India. It originates from India, and it is a Sanskrit term that translates to an instrument to expand or an instrument to liberate. So Tan meaning to expand and Tra to liberate. Together, this implies a system that expands awareness and leads to ultimate spiritual liberation. Unlike some paths that actually emphasize withdrawal of the world, which actually is oftentimes what the path of yoga teaches, this idea of renunciating the world and really withdrawing and using that as a means to kind of seek enlightenment and liberation. Tantra actually celebrates the body and really embraces the body as this kind of conduit for the divine, and really teaches us that we can actually use the physical body in a way that isn't necessarily an essential way, although again there can be a small aspect of that, but it uses it as a way to really alchemize so much pain and suffering and transmute it into something beautiful. So it's an incredible path of alchemy that, again, once you understand, can really help accelerate your spiritual growth. So again, this is a spiritual science that really uses the mind, body, and spirit as a means to self-realization. And as I mentioned, it differs from yoga in the sense that yoga, as incredibly powerful as it is on its own, kind of sees the world as kind of almost being a little kind of problematic in a way, which of course that has its own, has its own kind of set of teaching. But Tantra really invites us to use what we have in the physical world and take the pain and suffering and everything that we experience that is a natural byproduct of human existence and transmute it and transform it into something beautiful, and use, again, the physical world to help us do that. Use our physical bodies. And I'm going to get into some of the actual practical modalities that we use in Tantra, some of the spiritual practices that we use to help us get there. But the key idea and the distinction, especially between Tantra and yoga, is that Tantra actually celebrates this idea of the physical body and doesn't see it as like this hindrance towards liberation or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. So again, yoga and Tantra aim for the same goal, but their approaches are quite different. So let's get into some of the tools we use in Tantra, some of the practices that we utilize for this pursuit of spiritual liberation. So the first is going to be mantras. I think most people know what mantras are. They are sacred sound vibrations that when we utter, when we speak, has really the potential to help us tap into and tune into certain energies, really, and frequencies that we otherwise can't. And there are so many mantras. There are, mantras for pain, for suffering, for, seeking abundance. So many mantras that you have to first kind of understand what all of that entails, what all of the mantras are. But we do use mantras, in the yogic path, they use mantras as well. There are mantras, for instance, for the chakras. So there are seed mantras. But within Tantra, there are much longer mantras, and they are so powerful. And when you combine them with some of the other practices that we'll go over, they really have the potential to, again, help us utilize the physical senses as a means to liberation. There are mantras for specific deities, and honestly, just chanting Sanskrit words and terms alone really, again, has the potential to work on our energy bodies and really help us transform, again, so much suffering that we experience. And in Tantra, we also use what's called yantras. So we do yantra work, and essentially what yantras are, they're really cool and oftentimes very beautiful looking, but they're essentially geometric symbols of different deities, of different aspects really of the divine. And the ultimate universal kind of yantra is what's called the Sri Chakra. So you can kind of look it up, but it's just this really kind of beautiful geometric design that actually, if you're familiar with like sacred geometry or the flower of life, those kind of originated from yantra. So yantra was actually the original form of sacred geometry. Meditating with yantras and really kind of gazing at the point in the center, which is called the bindu, can really help us experience so much inner alchemy. And it actually has really profound effects, for instance, on the third eye. So already right there's this crossover a bit with yoga. But that alone, again, when you work with a certain deity, with a certain goddess, has the potential to be so incredibly transformative. And again, the Sri Chakra, which is the kind of like main big overall yantra, is really this ultimate feminine of divine consciousness, of the divine feminine. And then, of course, meditation. Meditation is such a key tool that we use in Tantra. Meditation, we hear all the time, has so much powerful benefits. And there are so many different forms of meditation within Tantra that you can do. Again, there are forms of meditation with just yantras alone or with certain goddesses. So meditation is a practice that we utilize in Tantra to help us alchemize pain and suffering and transmute it into something beautiful. So again, this is not about escaping reality, but becoming fully present with it. And through that, we can really unite and merge with the divine Shakti within. And of course, we can't talk about Tantra without addressing the beautiful 10 Mahavidyas, which are the tantric goddesses that we can work with. And this concept of, the goddesses is something that really deserves its own kind of video. But essentially, the goddesses, starting with Kali, the first one, who I think is the most well-known one, are really manifestations of our own personal struggles in life, our own trials and tribulations. And by working with these energies, and each one tend to represent something and kind of also represent the opposite, the counter of how we can use that and turn it into something beautiful, all teach us that unique lesson alone of how to, again, turn that pain into something beautiful. So for instance, Kali, the first Mahavidya, which really actually is the embodiment of the rest of the other 9, she kind of is this really fierce warrior goddess who really represents the annihilation of the ego. She is time, and really represents this idea of going through this kind of like birth and death in a way, and really destroying what no longer serves us as a means to really understand the capital S self, which is who we truly are. So they're so beautiful. They're really, really powerful energies, and working with them is an incredible way to, again, really utilize this, the concept of working with the physical body as a means to liberation. So again, each Mahavidya represents a unique aspect of divine feminine energy. So I'm going to go over each of the 10 Mahavidyas briefly, so you can kind of understand what each one embodies. So we have Kali, who is the destroyer of illusion and ego. We have Tara, the savior and guide through inner transformation. We have Tripura Sundari, the goddess of beauty, love, and spiritual bliss. We have Bhuvaneshwari, the queen of the universe, representing space and creation. We have Chinnamasta, a very fierce goddess, and she represents self-sacrifice and the transcendence of thought. We have Bhairavi, a raw power and inner discipline. We have Dhumavati, the crone goddess, and she reveals the hidden truth in sorrow. She's a good one to work with if you're going through a dark night of the soul. We have Bagalamukhi, mastery over speech and illusion. We have Matangi, embodied wisdom, art, and sacred speech. And we have Kamalatmika, who represents prosperity and spiritual abundance. So again, really representing how we can really utilize the physical world and not renounce it, even in the form of Kamalatmika, who actually represents really embracing, like for instance, wealth, and not seeing money as a bad thing, like how some spiritual traditions might kind of view. So again, working with the Mahavidyas is an intensely alchemical process, and working with each one represents something about the self and about all of creation. These goddesses are not just symbolic, but are living energies within the psyche and the cosmos. In Tantra, it's also really important to understand the dynamic interplay between Shiva and Shakti. You can also look at this interplay as a kind of feminine and masculine aspect of the universe, although I don't always love to use that masculine and feminine kind of verbiage, because it's still not enough to fully embody and encompass what Shiva and Shakti really entail, but you can kind of look at it as that. So we have Shiva, which represents pure consciousness, stillness, and awareness. And we have Shakti, which is the dynamic creative energy of life itself. She is the power that moves through the entire universe. And that's why the power of Shakti and Shiva are so significant and really important to understand, because it really is such a key element of Tantra as a whole. And that's why, as I mentioned in the beginning, Tantra is so misunderstood, because seeing it as a way to enhance, your sex life or this or that is just really rooted in the kind of Neo-Tantra approach really the Neo-Tantra worldview that began in the kind of 60s and 70s during the counterculture movement. So it's really not what Tantra is at all. I just feel like, the kind of like so-called hippie movement took like one sliver of what Tantra can potentially encompass and turned it into something huge, which again it's not really what it is. And so it's just important to really understand as a spiritual practitioner, if you want to learn about Tantra and really utilize its healing modalities, to understand how to do it properly. So ultimately, Shiva and Shakti represent the union of opposites, and ultimate spiritual liberation and awakening can happen once we really understand how to harness and really balance those two energies within ourselves. These are energies that exist within all of life forms. And then of course there's Kundalini Shakti, which also emanates from yoga, and that's the energy that arises from the base of the spine. And really awakening this energy can lead to profound spiritual insights, spiritual illumination, and overall spiritual awakening. And through disciplined practice, Kundalini rises through the chakras and has the ability to really purify the mind and body. And of course, it's really important to mention that working with the Kundalini is something that actually should be taken very seriously. It's not something to be rushed. I feel like oftentimes when people hear about Kundalini and learn about Kundalini awakening, they want to immediately awaken theirs, but that can actually sometimes be kind of dangerous. So it's just first important to understand what it is. Working with its energy really slowly and really gently is the key. So I hope this introductory video about Tantra was helpful. You can go into so much more depth and detail, but I just wanted to give an overview of what Tantra really is and what it encompasses, and how it's important to really understand the true nature of it, because it's so commonly misunderstood. So if you have any questions, let me know. Again, I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk soon.